Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast.
Go Blue, and welcome to our Michigan Game Day show for Washington. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. This week we leave the friendly confines of the Big House for a trip to Seattle. Joining us with his thoughts on that and more will be beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. We'll also hear a few cuts from Jedd Fisch's presser the other day. If you talk to any Michigan fan who's made a road trip to Husky Stadium, they'll tell you how scenic it is and how crazy and loud the crowds are there. It is an incredible environment for any game, but a primetime night game against Michigan will have that place hopping. Obviously, these are not the same two teams that met on January 8th in the national championship game. We know all about our struggles. Washington has 21 new starters and a new coaching staff. Still, they are off to a 3-2 start and have played even better than their own fans expected. It's our first road test of the year, and if you know what to expect, please let me know. I have no idea what's going to happen in this one. It's the midway point of the season, and now is the time teams usually separate, so buckle up. One of the Washington beat writers asked Jedd what was the biggest challenge in playing this Michigan team.
They run the ball extremely well, and they play great defense. So they've kept teams. I was watching the USC game before I came up here, and with 12 minutes left in the second quarter, USC had -3 yards, and Michigan had 121 yards, but the score was 7-0. That was an interesting one. You look at the Minnesota game, it was 24-3 before the game kind of went the other way there for a while. In the fourth quarter, Minnesota got hot, which was, what you saw. I think that, they certainly run the football exceptionally well.
Jedd said he's impressed with everything Sharon has accomplished in his time at Michigan.
Sharon's been there 6 years. That's his run game. He was the offensive line coach. He got there the year after I left. So he was the offensive line coach, I think the tight end coach, then the O-line coach, then the OC. And during that time, you could see how he built it from outside in. The tight ends became an elite group. Then the offensive line became an elite group. And then the whole offense last year was very hard to stop.
My guest today says Michigan will need more than 86 yards throwing the ball to win games like this or most others the rest of the way. With us next is beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. So stay with us. joining us this week on the show as we get ready for the first road trip of the year to Washington is beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. Great to have you back once again, Aaron.
Good to be back, Mike. We're in full football mode right now. Michigan's getting ready to make their first road trip of the season. Kind of odd, they played their first 5 games at home. They're one of 2 FBS schools. I actually went back and looked. One of 2 FBS schools that play their first 5 games inside their home stadium this year. So they got, I guess, lucky from the scheduling gods, so to speak, but now they get to hit the road and make the 2,300 mile trip to the Pacific Northwest.
It's going to be interesting. We're 5 games into the season now, almost at the midway point, Aaron. It will be officially on Saturday. I think it's safe to say you are, for the most part, who you are as a team by mid-season. I mean, there's always room for improvement. We're a team really with no passing game right now. Do you see any way that can be improved at this point?
Well, I think the only way to go is up at this point. It's just a matter of how much they go up. That's clearly been the Achilles heel for this Michigan offense so far is the lack of a passing attack. They tried it a little bit with Davis Warren early in the year. He was rather productive. I mean, he was completing nearly 2/3 of his passes. The problem is he was just throwing too many balls in the other team, and Michigan felt like that was eventually going to catch up to them. And eventually cost them games. So, and it certainly did a little bit to some extent against USC. So, they made the change at quarterback. They've certainly gone away from the passing game, as we've all seen. They're throwing at nearly about 50% less clip with Alex Orji behind center. And look, it was something we kind of expected, right? Like, we knew coming into the year, Alex Orji wasn't exactly the most polished passer. We hadn't seen him throw the ball much at all. In fact, he came in the year throwing with 1 pass attempt in his career. So it was clear that the way Michigan was going to go when they brought in Alex Orji, right? They were going to go back to the ground and pound style of attack that had made them successful the last couple of years. That's how they felt like that was going to be their best chance to win football games. So far, it's won them a pair of games. They're 2-0 with Alex Orji at quarterback. But as you said, the passing game is a concern. It's no doubt the biggest problem right now facing this team. But yeah, I mean, look, they can, I think, get it better. I think with more reps, more experience, Alex Orji can only get better. It's just a matter of how good he can get in a short period of time here, right? Like, as I said, he's not the most experienced thrower. He's not the most polished guy. And the receivers have to do more to get open, and that's been a problem as well.
Well, another area of concern to some degree is the offensive line, and I don't want to pick on these guys too much. Run blocking has been pretty darn good. Mm-hmm. But in the last 2 weeks, even with limited passing attempts from Alex, there has been a lot of pressure getting to him. He's taken hits. He's been chased. It was happening with Warren before him too. Obviously, that has to be cleaned up, but it's concerning at this point, isn't it?
Probably, again, another reason why they're not throwing the ball, as much now. I think Sherrone Moore, he's a very good offensive line coach. He can recognize when issues pop up, and while he may not be talking about them publicly, as you pointed out, they have had troubles in the pass blocking department. Part of it's probably a lack of cohesion. I mean, we talked about it coming into the year. This is a group of guys who collectively hadn't played together much at all. You had a couple of new guys. You got a redshirt freshman who hadn't really played much at all coming into the year at right tackle, and Evan Link, who has struggled mightily on that end of the line. But yeah, it's a problem. As you said, it was a problem with Davis Warren at quarterback. He faced a lot of pressure, and maybe perhaps it contributed to some of those interceptions. But it's another reason I think why Michigan hasn't just thrown the ball much. That's not a strong suit for them at this point. Throwing the ball, catching the ball, or blocking for passes. And it's, again, another reason why they probably elected to keep it on the ground here largely over the last couple of games.
Well, I feel for Sherrone right now. I mean, he's the man, and with that comes making hard decisions after 3 incredible years to compare with. When do you think he gets to the point where he says, hey, we're going to ride with Alex no matter what, or hey, we've got to give Davis Warren another shot? Do you think that's going to be on the horizon?
That's a good question. And I don't know if you're the head coach, if you can necessarily go back at Davis Warren. When you give the guy a leash of a couple games and you see the turnovers that he was committing on a regular basis, and you make the switch pretty suddenly, I don't know if you could do it. They seem committed to Alex for the time being. There's been no wavering at this point that I've gotten from the coaching staff. I guess if the passing issues continue to build at this level, perhaps they look elsewhere. Jack Tuttle hasn't been cleared, so he's theoretically available. And I thought maybe coming into the year, he might have been the best option of the three. But the problem is you just don't know where you're going to get on him on a week-to-week basis and whether he can stay healthy. So I think with regards to what Michigan wants to accomplish offensively, Alex seems like the best fit. He can take some pressure off the run game. He can help open some things up. And look, he's a really smart, capable guy. You've seen, the edict for when he was handed the reins of the offense was don't turn the football over, manage the offense, and put points on the board. And they've largely done that. He's only committed one turnover, and it was last Saturday, obviously, that interception. But the turnovers have been cut down, and it's helped put Michigan in a position to win some of these games. So, as of right now, there's been no indication that Michigan would move off of him. When they did make the change, Sharon was asked, if he could go back, if it's possible for him to go back eventually to Davis, if the situation presents itself. And he said he was adamant. He said, no, we're sticking with Alex, for the rest of for time, time being. So right now it's Alex's show. I think they're going to keep riding him until maybe the wheels fall off, so to speak. But as I said, there's a lot of room for him to grow in the passing attack. I know there hasn't been a lot of evidence to show that he can get better. But I do think with more reps, it's certainly, as I said, there's no way to go but up.
Well, I never thought I'd say this because I do not like two quarterback systems, but given how different those two guys are, what they bring to the offense, maybe playing them both as an option if the wheels fall off. I mean, it's not the option most of us want. It's not what Sharon wants, but I think we're sort of screeching to the point where, the reality is, hey, it might be worth a try. Would that surprise you?
No, not at all. It's certainly plausible, right? Like I think some of us were talking about a potential two quarterback system coming into the year, right? Because I think many of us did see that some of the strengths, Alex and Davis kind of complemented each other in some regards. But as we've heard from quarterbacks and even running backs, and they talk about wanting to get into a groove out there and not necessarily coming out, every couple plays, because then it becomes difficult to get comfortable back there. So I think Michigan probably wants to avoid that, at all costs, but potentially could it come up? Certainly. I guess it's certainly a plausibility toward the end of the year if push comes to shove and they need, whether it's a deep ball, a deep throw, and Michigan needs a long drive and they elect to put Davis in there. It's certainly possible. But as of right now, I think Alex is the guy until stated otherwise.
Well, after the USC game, I thought, okay, the defense is rounding into what we thought it would be. Started out strong on Saturday again, then let Minnesota put together some long drives in the second half. Should that be a worry, or is the fact that the offense isn't keeping the defense off the field like it has the last 3 years, is that the real focus or concern?
Yeah, it's probably a combination of both. I know that's probably the easy way out to answer the question, but we've seen this defense certainly turn a corner. They've certainly gotten better. I think Wink Martindale's adjusted a little bit when it comes to schematic things and blitzes and everything else. But if you go back to that game Saturday, it was largely two, like you said, it was two drives at the end of the game, two long drives that they gave up that to help get Minnesota back in the game. The third touchdown was a result of the long punt return, so that's really no fault of the defense. So it has been funny, the last couple of weeks. It seems like the defense has, and Wink Martindale specifically, they've kind of been out-schemed in the second half, out-adjusted. Teams have kind of figured things out, and Michigan's, let up some long, time-churning, key drives.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a risk you take with the heavy blitz that Wink Martindale likes to do. Now he dialed it back a little bit, a couple weeks ago against USC. But, by and large, he's been blitzing at a 40-50% rate despite of what he wants to tell everybody. So that creates this kind of boom or bust effect like Michigan's seen offensively, right? You can get to the quarterback, you can get some sacks and get some short drives, but you succumb to big plays. And in the case of Minnesota Saturday, some long drives where Minnesota kind of exploited the defense. They were able to get chunk plays and move down the field at will. So it's, I'm not so much concerned. I think they're going to continue to play, get better. I mean, they've done a good job, I think, really since that week 2 loss to Texas of adjusting and realizing, I think, what works. But nonetheless, don't get me wrong, they're going to still be they're going to give up some long drives moving forward. That's kind of the nature of how they play. It's not what we're used to, especially the last couple of years under Jesse Minter, that bend don't break defense. Michigan's just not that this year. They're kind of that get home defense, or they give up some long drives and points.
Well, this week, as we well know, Michigan travels to Washington, going in as underdogs to an unranked team, which is odd in itself. And I watched Washington against Rutgers last Friday night. They rolled up over 500 yards total offense. It's an all-new cast of characters out there, vastly different than we saw on January 8th. But the Huskies have been really a balanced, effective team so far, haven't they?
Yeah, they've been really good, really productive offensively. They got a really good quarterback in Will Rogers. He's a fifth-year guy, 23 years old. Doesn't turn the ball over much. Washington's committed just 2 turnovers this entire season, so they take care of the football and they can move down the field. As you said, they can pile up the yards. They're averaging something like 470 yards a game, so they're very productive. Their problem, as you pointed out, Saturday against the Rutgers, and it wasn't the first time. They have trouble scoring points. They're converting on third down at only a 38% clip. So they're not translating some of these drives into points. So that's been their biggest issue. But no, very good. They got talented receivers. They got a 2-back system they like to use. Some explosive guys that and they're very proficient. Will Rogers played under an air raid attack at Mississippi State, so he's familiar. He's an experienced guy, and so far, I mean, you scratch your head and wonder why they're 3-2, but then you kind of dig deep a little bit, and you realize some of the inefficiencies and third down woes have hurt them.
No, absolutely they have. They've made boneheaded plays in the red zone the first 5 weeks. You have to look at it and say, hey, if you can clean that up, it has not been a physical issue or a production issue. It's just making incredibly stupid decisions and plays in the red zone.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got that, as you mentioned, a veteran senior quarterback in Will Rogers who's putting up good numbers. He makes good decisions, has some nice receivers. I mean, led by former Wolverine Giles Jackson, has 34 catches. They've got a running back in Jonah Coleman who's a bruiser. He's run for over 500 yards. So they're going to stress this Michigan defense, aren't they?
Yeah, I'm curious to see how Michigan's defense responds. And Michigan's defense hasn't been particularly great in the red zone either. They've given up their share of touchdowns down there. I think 10 to 17 drives from opponents have ended up in the end zone. So I'm curious to see how this Michigan defense holds against this Washington offense, especially if Washington's able to move the football and get into the red zone, as we were talking about. So that's kind of going to be an area I'm going to be paying attention to. But going back to Rodgers, I mean, he's completed nearly 75% of his passes, just to give you an idea of how accurate and productive he's been. No interceptions. He's thrown for 1,500 yards, 10 touchdowns. So he's been very good. I'm just curious to see if this Washington offense can kind of finish drives. That's going to be key. So far teams have done a relatively decent job of doing so against the Michigan, as we talked about. They've had some long sustaining drives. So, the Michigan defense is going to have their hands full. But by all accounts, they're going to get back some of their key players. Quarterback Will Johnson's expected back. Edge rusher Josiah Stewart's expected back. Makari Page is, by all accounts, healthy and ready to go. So they're going to have some of their key guys, and I think they're going to need all hands on deck to try and slow Will Rogers and the Husky offense down.
Well, even though I don't like this game plan, when I look at how do I think Michigan's going to attack this team, I think the only option is, hey, it's midseason. You do what you do best, especially your first road game in a hostile environment. You run the football, you use Orgy's legs some, throw some short-range passes, especially to continue to build his confidence. Key, do not turn the ball over. I know that sounds simple, but I think it's what Sharon has to do. How about you?
No, that's exactly it. That's what was preached to Alex when he was given the keys to the offense, right? Like, manage the offense, you don't turn the ball over, and if you got to throw the football away or whatever the case may be, just don't force it. Don't give up, easy field position, and let the defense work. So that's exactly it. If Michigan can, put a ground game together and have enough, drives where they can net some points, they're going to put themselves in a position to, at the end of the game, to be in a position to win. And that's ideally what they want to be. When your passing game is struggling, when you can't, maybe convert a third down like you'd want to, you're going to need some explosive big plays on the ground, and that's kind of what they've leaned on so far. It's amazing. You look at this Michigan offense through 5 games, and particularly the last 2.5 with Alex Orgy at quarterback. It's largely been a boom or bust offense. I was digging in the numbers last week. I wrote about it at MLive.com, but the 27 drives Michigan's had with Alex Orgy at quarterback, 9 have ended in points, 7 in touchdowns, 10 3 and outs, and non-touchdown drives are averaging just 4 plays and 6.4 yards a drive. So Michigan's basically, they're getting into the end zone or going 3 and out, which is pretty remarkable when you think about it. But they've done enough to win these football games. And at this point, that's all they're asking for. That's all they want. At the end of the game, come up with more points than the opponent, no matter the spread, no matter what's expected of them. Just keep winning football games in any manner they can. And right now, so far, they've been able to do it.
Well, the other thing is, and I think this is huge, it's the first road game. It's a crazy environment to play in. So for that game plan to work, Michigan really has to play from the lead. I mean, nothing we've seen so far would indicate this team can come back from being down, let's say, 1 or 2 scores. Michigan has got to control the tempo in this game, don't they, Aaron?
Oh, 100%. I mean, you saw that against Texas, week 2. They went down big, and you got the feeling right away they weren't equipped to come back, and they did it. So like you're absolutely right. They got to get on the scoreboard early, ideally first, and play from ahead. That was a combination that worked in 2021 and 2022. They largely got up on opponents, and they were able to, kind of eventually suffocate them into, to the point where Michigan was able to hold out toward the end. And that's the case here, this weekend. They have to, similar situation, especially on the road, in an environment they're unfamiliar with. They've never played in Seattle. At least this coaching staff and these players haven't. And against a new look Washington team. This isn't the national championship Husky team we saw in January. They got a lot, as you said, a lot of new players, a new head coach in Jed Fish, but they're still very good. And this Michigan team clearly isn't what they were last year. So they got their work cut out for them. Scoring early is going to be key, because if you can't, we've seen that they have struggles throwing the football, and if you go down 2 possessions, that's a long way back for them.
Well, for 5 weeks, we've been saying this week we're going to learn a lot about this Michigan team. I'm not sure we like what we've learned so far, but we can say it again this week, Aaron. How they respond to being on the road in a hostile environment will be huge and tell us a lot more about them, won't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, every year it seems like there's one road game where it kind of defines the season, right? In 2021, it was the game at Wisconsin, where a place they hadn't won in a long time. Last year was a road game at Penn State where they ran the football 30 plus times in a row or whatever it was to win the game. I mean, there's always seems like that moment where, you get a feeling that, okay, this team is what we think it is. Look, there's a lot of uneasiness going into this week. I know for Michigan fans, they're concerned about the passing attack. They're concerned about later in the year when they have to go against the Oregons and Ohio States. But right now, this is a good Washington team. There's no doubt about it. They're close to being ranked, and they've got 2 losses, but they still have one of the better, more proficient offenses in the country. So if Michigan can slow them down, I think that's a good sign for the defense. And then if they can, claw out a win, I think folks will maybe feel a little better about the offense. But look, they want to see more from the passing attack. There's no doubt about it. I suspect Michigan's going to try a little bit, but as you said, the game MO for Saturday is clearly not turn the football over and win on the ground. And I think if you can continue to do that, I think it's going to give some folks some hope. I mean, look, Khalil Mullins has been fantastic. He's probably been the unheralded story of the Michigan team this year, right? A guy who came into the year as number 2 running back. He's been largely their savior this year offensively, right? If it wasn't for Khalil, Michigan would probably be 2-3 at this point. So he's been very good. They got to lean on him and get some gains on the ground and try and turn this thing out. Have some long staying drives, keep the ball out of Washington's hands. And you'll be there in the end to win it.
Well, final question before we let you get away, Aaron. You've covered Michigan football for a while now. I've been watching them for decades. And I think what worries me, even more than the fact that this is a road game, first one of the year, is some of the body language that I'm seeing on the field, especially in the second half. And when you watch it for a long time, there's a difference on both sides of the ball, really, especially, as I said, in the second half. This does not seem like a very confident team to me right now. Do you see that too?
Yeah, 100%. It's not the team that it was last year. It's certainly not the team from even going back to 2022 or 2021. And look, players will outright admit that. They've said it multiple times to us. We're not last year's team, for better or for worse, right? I think they realize what they are. They're work in progress. They're a team that's, I think, still trying to figure themselves out. But no, the body language is accurate. It's something we see behind the scenes a little bit more. I have questions about maybe some of the leadership on this team. It's not some of the guys we've seen in years past. And look, it's a work in progress. There's no doubt about it. They're trying to win as many games as possible. They got a young, inexperienced coaching staff, guys that are still trying to, figure themselves out as well. And I think fortunately they feel good about themselves being 4-1 at this point, right? There's a situation, there's a possibility where there's a scenario where they're 3-2 or 2-3 at this point. So I think they feel good about where they're at. Fortunate maybe for where they're at, but they've got a lot of room for improvement on both sides of the ball, especially offense. But no, it's not last year's team. That's something they've outwardly admitted. They're not nearly as good. They lost a lot of talent last year. You go down the board on both sides of the ball, a lot of key playmakers, guys they leaned on quite a bit. And I thought maybe that they thought they were going to have more depth defensively than they had, going into the year. They've leaned on some guys, but I don't think the quality of depth has been there like they've been used to in years past, and it's made them pay as well. So just going back to my original point, it's a work in progress. They're trying to get better. It's not last year's team. They know that. And yeah, we're going to roll and see where this thing goes.
Yeah, it's where we are. 1 week at a time, grind it out and get a W any way you can, and even bigger if it's on the road. So it's going to be fun to watch how it rolls out. With us today has been beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. Aaron, always a pleasure to have you on the show and get your insight. So we thank you for your time and look forward to that next visit.
You bet, Mike. Thanks for having me.
On Quick Hits today, the last injury news we heard is that Will Johnson and Josiah Stewart are ready to go. We'll need all hands on deck for this one, no doubt about it. Here are a few game day notes of interest. Michigan leads the series with 9 wins against 5 losses. The first meeting was on September 26, 1953 in Ann Arbor, a 50-0 Michigan win. These two teams last met on a day we will all remember well, January 8th of this year in the national championship game, a 34-13 Michigan win. Jed Fish is in his first year as head coach. His record is 3-2. In 4 years overall as a head man, his record is 20-22. The Huskies were 14-1 last year and Pac-12 champions. They ended the season after the loss to Michigan, ranked number 2 in the country. They return 0 starters on either side of the ball. The weatherman says it's going to be a beautiful night for football. Temps in the mid-60s at game time, slipping into the 50s. There is very little chance of rain and the winds will be light. Perfect football weather. So the first road trip of any season can be an adventure. This year will be no exception. When was the last time a team ranked number 10 was an underdog? That is the reality, though. We've seen the first 5 games, and it's easy to understand why we are not favored. I think this is going to be another game where we just have to grind it out and win any way we can. I hope we're surprised and the passing game starts coming around, but I'm not holding my breath. Run the ball, play defense, maybe force a few turnovers, and gut out a road win. That would be huge. Next week, we can take a breath during the bye, and hopefully we're 5-1 at that point. Joining us with his thoughts on Michigan football at the midway point will be Isaiah Hole from the Wolverines Wire. So I hope you'll join us. That will do it for now. Have a great Wolverine weekend, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Think victory, beat Washington. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue.
Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!